Good afternoon, everyone. I want to talk to you about ERM's approach to catchment water risk management and the stewardship, the good water stewardship. We've heard a little bit of talking today about social licence to operate, good stewardship, the problems of managing your water. It's a significant issue in the mining game today. So we've got good numerical, ecological and social skills to assess risks to mining companies throughout the life of mine, from exploration through operation to post-closure. So water is a strategic asset for mining companies, but competition for these resources, as well as natural and man-made changes in the hydrological regime, such as El Nino cycles, more intense storm events, more frequent droughts, mean that water is also a material risk for many companies. The latest Carbon Disclosure Project report for water indicates the respondents see that water scarcity and flooding are two risk drivers, and 3/4 of the respondents anticipate higher operating costs as a result of water-related risks. By looking at water strategically in planning processes, companies are able to mitigate additional operating costs. So some examples of when it goes wrong. In the top left, you've got water shortages. An operation was reliant on cheap hydropower, and they suffered a $100 million write-down when a dry year meant water was not available to produce the power. Good planning for different eventualities have led to different power supply strategies. On the top right, water surpluses, so too much water. Flooding in the Bowen Basin halted production for several months. Were there any flooding response plans that could have lessened the production downtime? Bottom left, a company's share price fell by 5% in a single day when a shareholder disinvested their $850 million after deciding that legal tailings disposal or discharge into the river was grossly unethical. Were there alternative tailings treatment options available, a single act may only momentarily affect share price, but continued behaviour may raise investment risk profiles above acceptable limits for certain shareholders. And the last example, local community concerns about water pollution, delayed start of a world-class deposit by more than 6 years. Could alternative dewatering practices have been economically employed to alleviate stakeholder concerns? So the International Council for Mining and Metals, with members comprising 24 of the leading mining companies, announced in January this year, their position on water stewardship. The commitments require members to apply strong and transparent water governance, manage water operations effectively, collaborate to achieve responsible and sustainable water use. Effectively, it means that going forward, all mine sites will establish an understanding of their water impacts and risk using the approaches outlined in the ICMM document shown here. ERM has been adopting a catchment scale approach to analysing water risk at mine sites for several years now, and supported the ICMM and one of its members in implementing the guide at a mine site in Brazil. I'm going to show some examples of that pilot study later in this talk. Clients need to understand their risks in terms of the full area of direct influence, those within the fence line. Increasingly, however, this isn't enough to effectively manage risks to the business, and companies are needing to understand implications at a much broader level. So international level through NGO attention, national level from regulatory pressures, regional level from catchment management plans, neighbouring communities through competition for access to water, as well as the site risks for long-term abstraction or discharge permits. This also mirrors the need to adopt a catchment-wide perspective. So this is the example I was talking about in Brazil, and we see here that the mine is located upcountry, but there's a pipeline that runs all the way to the coast. So you've got several different catchments within the immediate area of the mine and processing plant, but there's a significant influence in multiple catchments. So in addition to considering the impacts to the mine within the mine site boundary caused by water-related issues, there's a chance that a significant number of risks caused by or to the mine could occur as a result of effects within the wider catchment or catchments. The catchment is not just a single physical extent, but rather a series of functional boundaries described by activity, hydrology, hydrogeology, and stakeholder influence. In some instances, the catchment could extend to the state, country, or international scale as a result of actions of local or national governments, or as a result of changing climatic or social conditions. The influence of each of these factors on the operations needs to be considered, and solutions to manage the identified risks need to be designed in line with the threat to business operations. Some or all of the factors influencing water-related stress may already exist in the region before the mining company arrives. For instance, regions with limited institutional capacity for supplying safe water and sanitation, regulatory regime which is in flux due to existing pressures on water, changes in seasonal rainfall patterns putting stress on security of supply or of safely accessible land. If the project has real or perceived negative impacts on water in terms of availability, changes in access, or changes in quality, the consequences to the project might include potentially costly remediation to reverse or mitigate the effect, impacts to reputation and stakeholder relations, and ultimately potential suspension or loss of the project's exploration or production permit and its social licence to operate. There are often a very real set of shared water challenges within the catchment. These can include the memory of and impact of previous catastrophic water events, not only droughts but huge anthropogenic events. Impacts from the mine in Brazil include regulator concerns about the transfer of water out of the catchment, and also how to accommodate the demands of development and the water supply in the catchment. And also local villager concerns about scarcity, access, quality, livelihood viability, tailings dam failure, and so on. At the catchment scale, complex hydrologic processes, surface water and groundwater interaction, can be modelled, and water balance predictions can be interpreted within a big picture context, such as external influences on the water system. The catchment scale is conceptual as well as physical. Catchment boundaries are typically identified in SEIAs, but they're often too narrowly identified to encompass all of the water-related risks. And additionally, important water-related stakeholders are not always covered in stakeholder management plans. In order to quantify water-related risks to the operation over time, the first step is to understand the water census. We look at all the key inputs and outputs within the catchment. We gather data related to current hydrological regime, including rainfall, river flows, presence of groundwater resources, use on existing resources, existing regulatory environment, and so on. And we also gather information about possible future changes within the catchment, climate change effects, land cover changes, increasing populations, regulatory changes, new industry, hydroelectric or other supply dams, etc. It's an iterative process which involves collecting the data, extensive stakeholder consultation, and collaboration with the company to define scenarios and sensitivities. Everything is then built into a GIS data management system which becomes a live repository for all data and information. Depending on the situation within the catchment, ERM has a range of numerical and analytical modelling tools to apply. For example, groundwater modelling to assess the influence from company abstractions or third-party abstractions. In the example shown here on the left, a fictional town grows and it draws its supply water from groundwater, and the abstraction places stress on existing surface water supplies which the mining company uses. Or surface water modelling, such as the example here of simulated future flow patterns encompassing climate change variations and land cover changes to determine the statistical frequency of extreme low water events over the life of the mine. And we can put them into stochastic simulations such as GoldSim, placing all the collated and simulated inputs and outputs within the catchment into the model and providing a range of potential outcomes to help the company anticipate their water-related risks and work with stakeholders to come up with mutually acceptable solutions. The results of the water census and any modelling undertaken are incorporated into an updatable, queryable tool to allow a company to add new information as it comes to hand and trial new scenarios or combinations of existing scenarios. These tools are also of use with working with stakeholders to demonstrate the results of studies or to find mutually beneficial solutions. Here we've got a couple of examples where you're able to, the company is able to choose the year that they're interested in, choose the deposit they're interested in, and understand the dewatering and what the effects are going to be in the future. So early planning and incorporation of solutions to water-related risks is the key. However, the assessment and management tools can be drawn upon at any stage of the project mind cycle to assess the potential risk and help outline workable solutions. So we have a list of tools and approaches that we can apply at each stage here, and some of them carry through all the way through. So lastly, the benefits of the approach. Water needs to be a focus area to ensure good mine management, and it's usually a business critical resource and a potential cause for conflict. Some benefits of the ERM approach are listed here, including effective communication tools and cost savings due to targeted studies, design engineering, monitoring plans, and so on. Understanding the water balance and where catchment level effects can impact an operation not only helps to identify and address risks, but also helps in planning and execution of a water stewardship approach. Thank you.